Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. 2, because I'm a fan of punk music. And 3, it's just more fun, right? If this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. Please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Gavin Neate, who is the founder and CEO of Neatbox. Hey Gavin, how are you doing?
I'm really good. It's an absolute pleasure to be joining you today.
Gavin, for the benefit of the folks that don't know you and don't know Neatbox and things, can you tell us a little bit about you and a bit about the work that you do?
Yeah, certainly. There's a very good reason people won't know about me. In the same way that people usually switch off when you start talking to them about life insurance or or maybe funeral arrangements and things like this, is because when I start off telling people about what I do, I mention the word disability. And of course, people go, oh, well, I'm not disabled, or I'm never going to be disabled. So they don't really want to sort of get involved in that conversation. So sure. I've moved away from talking about disability, and I talk about equality and equity. And I also like to point out to people that as we get older, there's a very good chance that we're all going to be disabled in some way. It's obvious. Mm-hmm. But my background was guide dogs for the blind. I used to train people how to use guide dogs. So I used to match the dog. I was the last person in the chain of training. The dog would go through a puppy walk or a dog trainer, and then it would come to me, and then I would match the dog with a particular client, and then I would train the dog for that particular client, and then I would train the client how to use the dog. And that was just an absolute joy. I did it from 1996 until 2015, and it was the job that was going to take me all the way through to retirement. I absolutely loved it. And right. Yeah, if you spoke to anybody about a career and you said you were a guide dog trainer, they would look at you with a bit of a smile and go, that must be the best job in the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, I mean, it's a great job, and I mean, there must be such a sense of fulfillment, and also kind of a little bit of kind of loss. I can imagine that you can't train dogs and not get attached to them.
Well, I could. I think that's what made me a little bit different in the sector I was working in. In fact, not getting attached to them was a massive bonus.
Right.
Because the
well,
day
obviously.
The day you hand the dog to its new owner, the last thing you want the dog to do is to be looking at you. And it might be, if this is the guide dog owner's or the blind person's first dog, they might not be particularly good at building a bond. So the last thing you want to do when they're struggling to build a bond is for the dog to be looking at me and going, what's going on, Dad? Why are you ignoring me? So I would get to the point where within 6 hours of me handing the dog to somebody else, the dog would be like, oh, thank God for that. That other guy was pretty boring. I'm really chuffed to be with you because you seem to love me.
Very well. So now we were in touch via Twitter because you shared a great story with me regarding sort of welcome me again, or welcome me. You'll kind of correct me in a minute. And but can you tell me about the story and the welcome kind of app and how it works and stuff? Because I just thought it's worth kind of resharing. So tell me the story.
It's welcome. But if anybody just writes the word welcome down, you go to WELCOME, brilliant, welcome. But if you just notice the last two letters of the word welcome, it says me. Now, how many times do you walk into a shop, supermarket, train station, airport and see welcome emblazoned above the door? And how welcome do you feel? How welcome does the building or the people inside make you feel? And if you take the me out of it, it's about me. This is about me. You're saying welcome to me, not the person walking behind me. So what we did when we looked at that as a logo, we went, well, we just put the M and the E in a different font, which was all about me. I work in disability. I have always worked around disability. And it was about, well, who are the people that get the least welcome? Who doesn't really feel welcome when they go into a venue or a shop?
Right.
And it's, generally speaking, disabled people. It's all people that have a problem communicating. The issue here is that staff don't necessarily know how to communicate with disabled people. They may have been given training. They may have had an induction when they joined that company or venue or offices or whatever it is, but they're really just going by what they remember and what they've learned in their life, maybe a little bit of common sense. And they go, well, I'll just be nice. I'll fall back on being nice, because most people in customer service have been employed because they have the ability to be nice. Well, being nice isn't what blind people, deaf people, people with hearing impairments, whatever. It's not necessarily what's useful to them. If you think about walking into a Japanese person who doesn't speak English, walking into a shop and you're just being nice, well, that doesn't actually help them. Knowing Japanese would help them. Yes. So I was like, well, how can I improve the relationship between the customer service person and the disabled person who's walking through the door? And that's where welcome came from. It was my understanding, ultimately, while I was working with Guide Dogs for the Blind, it was an understanding that more and more people who were disabled were using technology, was how could I connect the technology in the hand or the pocket of the visitor to the technology that was actually in the building or the customer service team behind the desk or receptionist. And it was really just that thought that if I could connect one with the other based on my proximity to the building, I could actually train, or at the very least raise awareness in the staff member about my needs as a disabled person before I walk through the door.
Right.
And that became welcome.
Wow. I mean, it's cool. I mean, I love the idea that you're just collapsing or trying to bridge that sort of communication kind of app. I mean, because I've written about disability and customer service experience before. I mean, I really love the idea of what you're trying to do and to facilitate that connection. But I mean, the problem is that often people think that it's a small problem or it's a small domain, right?
Yeah.
But I know that you've got some stats regarding sort of disability. And say the UK, let's use the UK because that's where we're both based, but use the UK as a reference point. I mean, can you give me some stats regarding disability in the UK to give us a sense of the scale of what we're missing, the number of people that we're overlooking?
Yeah.
The size of the, whether it's the market, the opportunity, or the problem, whichever way you want to frame it, like how big is it? What are we talking about?
So if you think about this from a point of view of visible disabilities, we think, well, okay, 4% of disabled people are using wheelchairs as an example.
Right.
But if you think about disability as a whole, now, traditionally we've always thought of, guide dog owner, wheelchair user, power chair user, somebody with crutches, maybe somebody with a hearing aid, if we've been able to notice it a few years ago, certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly somebody with an ear trumpet. However, 20% of the world's population, 20% of the UK population are disabled. 20%.
And that's physical plus also
that's hidden disabilities.
And what would you also include in it? I mean, things like...
So, yeah, you're talking anything from muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, acquired brain injury, epilepsy, autism, stammering, dyslexia, diabetes. And you can sum that up with 80% of disabled people have hidden conditions. So you have got a very large proportion of people coming through your door who are disabled, but you would never know it. And they may not be getting the same service as everybody else purely because the idea of walking up to you as a barista in Starbucks and saying, I'd like a flat white coffee, please. And by the way, I also have schizophrenia. So could you maybe not write my name on the side of it and call it out, because that's going to give my spider senses are going to tingle as soon as you do that, and that it's not going to be a good, comfortable feeling for me. Well, actually, I tell you what, I'm just not going to go into Starbucks because how can I explain that?
Sure.
Whereas if you know that before I walk through the door, if you know that I have dyslexia, and you know that part of my arriving at your venue is filling out a form, and you know I have dyslexia, you're not going to ask me to fill out the form when I've got 3 or 4 people behind me. If you know I have a stammer, you might go, Okay, give this person time, maybe even go to a little bit of a quieter part of a reception or into a building. Or if somebody is deaf, turn the music down, or go into a room where you know that they're going to have a greater chance to hear you. Or if they're using lip reading, to make sure there isn't a light source behind you, so that you know, when you on Zoom, when you've got somebody who's got light behind them and it looks like they're in a witness protection program, well, you can't do lip reading in that situation. But if you know that 5 minutes before the person walks through the door, you give better customer service. When you give better customer service, the person feels happier about coming into your business. You feel brilliant about giving good customer service. They feel happier about coming in. They come in again. They want to come in again because they know they're going to get good customer service.
It's that uncertainty. It's that you take away the uncertainty, right?
Yeah,
so they end up kind of like, almost you end up with a fast track to loyalty, because people go, I know what I'm going to get there. They're good people. They understand it. I've got this kind of facility that I can arrange to be there, and they understand what I need, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So
and at the level,
building this portfolio of like, these are things I'm just going to keep going up. These are things and places I'm going to keep going back to.
Yeah. And at the level, and this is the beautiful thing about it, it empowers the disabled person to say what they want, to say how they want to be interacted with. Because traditionally what we do is we say, do this to or for a disabled person when they walk through the door. But that doesn't take into consideration the individual's wants, needs, and requirements. It just says this is what you do to somebody. And it also ensures that the balance of power is very much weighted in on the side of the person who's non-disabled. And that means that we constantly then look at the person with disability, and that's a medical term, as somebody who is lesser or in need of help.
Yes.
And of course, nothing is further from the truth. If you look at some of the remarkable disabled people we have on our planet, who you'd walk through God bless him, when Stephen Hawking was alive. If Stephen Hawking arrived and you recognized him, you'd be very aware that you were in the presence of somebody whose brain was the size of a planet. Yes. And you'd be like, I am certainly not going to take this guy for granted. However, if he had walked through the door and you didn't know who he was, you probably wouldn't even talk to him. You'd talk to the person next to him.
No, indeed. I mean, we're going to get into this whole idea of, just being inclusive, the way that we look at the world and how we could design service and experience. And it made me think about a time when earlier this year, Forrester, I think, published something which included a bunch of trends predictions, and they talked about 2021 is going to be the year of inclusive customer experience. And I sort of read that, and I quite funnily nearly snorted my coffee out of my nose.
Trends.
Because it made me think, blimey, so if this year is going to be the year of inclusive CX, by implication, does that mean, and it's a new trend rather, and does that mean that CX wasn't inclusive before, right?
Well, I think it probably wasn't. I think I can explain that in a very easy way. We do what we see. If you look at television and you take television back 10 years, you didn't see disabled people on television.
Right.
You didn't see disabled people in adverts. You didn't see disabled actors. If you look at television now, you aren't surprised when you see Liz Carr on Silent Witness. You aren't surprised when you see, I've forgotten his name, the actor's name, Killian Lannister on the chat with dwarfism. You see these
Peter Dinklage.
That's it. Yeah, Peter Dinklage. When you see people, you start realizing they're part of your society. And that's been the same for women, of course, with gender equality. It's the same for sexual orientation. It's the same for religious freedoms. It's the same for different Black ethnic minorities and things like this. Well, we've never really done that for disability because we've never made the world accessible. You didn't see Black people in South Africa in a particular building at a certain time. So it'd be very easy to think they didn't exist because you didn't see them. Well, we are increasingly seeing disabled people. We look at Ada Adebayan, we look at Caroline Casey, we look at Sophie Morgan on TV. There are people all over the place. And of course, you've got David Blunkett back in the 90s. We've got all these people that we see on a regular basis and we go, oh yeah. And we're seeing them more and more and more now. And because of that, it means that we're starting to realize that they are our customers. They're the people who are coming through the door. And if they aren't coming through the door, it's because we haven't made our business welcoming to them.
Right. I think it's, I'm just wondering about the idea that just because we don't see it and it's not portrayed, is that it makes me think about this art depict reality, reality kind of like does art follow reality? Does reality follow art? If you know if you understand what I mean.
Yeah. It's what happens first. It's chicken and egg sort of type thing. I think there are certain times when there are drives. If you look at the Paralympic Games, a lot of the people that are now on TV as reporters and Homes Under the Hammer and stuff like this, they're people that were probably in the Paralympic Games. Yeah. The sports people who have retired and are now doing different things or have got involved in other stuff, and we now see them. So the chap on Last Leg, right. Alex Brooker. So yes. we see people like this, and we go, right, well, we wouldn't have seen them before, but we're seeing them now all the time, and that means that they're part of the world that we are. Then it sort of like builds that rolling stone. It's sort of like it's just gathering, or it's a snowball. It's gathering momentum, and it increases all the time.
I mean, I get it, but it also frustrates me because as I said, I've written about it before. I wrote a story about somebody. I was on a trip to India, on a work trip to India. I encountered this young man, and I forget his name, but he was in the hotel, and he was manning the coffee station. Yeah. In the hotel. And he had all his badges on and he had all these signs, and he had a speech impairment. He couldn't really kind of talk very well. And I think he had a hearing impairment as well. But he had all these signs that kind of explained, and he was kind of gesturing. He was so welcoming and so positive in how you want to do so I went to get a new cup of coffee, and then I met him. And he said, and he was sort of gesturing, "Let me help you," sort of thing. Showed me this station that pointed to all the signs, so I understood what was going on. It was incredible.
Well, he was going the extra mile for you, wasn't he? Really?
Well, I think he was just like a wonderful human being, but probably grateful for having the opportunity in this sort of 4 or 5 star hotel that we were staying in, a big brand hotel. This wasn't an independent; it's a big brand hotel, and they've just given this opportunity to play a role. And because I think there's 2 sides to the coin on this. There's the customer side, people that have disabilities and they're we can facilitate them getting a better service and experience, but also the role that they can play in delivering those experiences as well.
Yeah, there's a great company called Purple Goat, which is a marketing company ran by Martin Sibley. Martin had Accommodable, which was the company that did accessible holidays, which were then bought out by Airbnb. And Martin now runs Purple Goat, and all the people that work in the marketing company are disabled. Right. And they're no less of a marketing company than anybody else. And in fact, you could say that in today's day and age, when you've got something like Tesco looking to improve how they market to a large proportion of the people that walk through the door, well, you're going to want a company like Purple Goat to help you to do it.
Mm. Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, I just, this is why I like kind of like shining the light on some of these things, just almost to kind of point the finger and go like, we need to look at this. We need to be better at this. We need to kind of like, think about all of this sort of stuff, because it's part of the role.
It's part of the role, Adrian. But and I didn't really mention the stats before, but we talked about 20% of the world's population, 20% of the UK's population, which is 13.5 million people. Mm-hmm. The spending power of disabled people in the UK alone every year is £274 billion.
Wow.
8 trillion worldwide. But £274 billion, 50% of disabled people have said they've had customer service so poor that they would go somewhere else if there was an alternative business.
Right.
Now, that's a lot of money to be losing out on if you can't find ways to innovate and to make sure that the staff you employ understand who's coming through the door.
Gavin, let's go back to the app and help me understand the impact that your solution is having kind of on sort of people and how it sort of works. I mean, if you can do that through maybe giving us a couple of examples of firms that are using kind of your tech and your approach and what they're doing has benefited them and has benefited not just their customers, but also their employees as well, because that's going to bring it to life and sort of, if you like, show the power of the approach, or they feel like the bridge that you're building.
Yeah, totally. And so just to explain how it works, we're just about to launch it as a web app, but it's been an app for the last couple of years. But the person downloads the free app, they put in a basic profile, they then look down a list of the venues that are actually on the system, they pick a venue that they're going to, they just give a 4-hour window of when they might be at that venue, and they say they're going. They also put in what they want to do when they get there. And that automatically triggers a message to the venue that pops up on their screen that says, this person is coming, this is what they want to do when they arrive. That could be, I want some popcorn and a Pepsi Max before I go into the cinema, and an audio description or whatever it might be. But it could be anything at all, like I'm visiting my doctor and whatever. But that message pops up on the screen in the venue they're going to, but also a photograph, an overview of a condition the person would like them to have awareness of, and then the links to information about that particular condition, and then top tips on how somebody might interact. So we give like 5 to 8 top tips, which would be specific to that particular condition, or anybody with that condition, not just that individual, anybody. And that means that the next person who walks through the door with a guide dog gets better customer service as well. So you don't have to be using the app to improve having better customer service, just the person who's came through the door before you. So we launched it in end of 2018. 2019, we're spending a lot of time explaining to people that what they had wasn't as good as it could be. 2020 came along and we hit what we hit with COVID. And now we've just started to really sell again just recently. But a few of our clients so far have been the likes of Diageo, Deloitte, Scottish Government, Irish Rail, House of Fraser, Royal Bank of Scotland, NatWest, Visit Scotland, Northlink Ferries.
Right.
It's growing and growing and growing. And the NHS are just about to launch. We've just launched with a dental practice in London. City of Westminster Council are just about to launch. And what we do is we put the information in their hands and the staff members' hands. They now have an understanding of how to interact with a person. There's a great example of, this was actually with Atos. And it was the staff member who was going to meet somebody. And I was standing with them because it was a demo day. Mm-hmm. And I stood with this lady and I said, right, we know, we've just had an indication that Fred is going to turn up, and Fred is a guide dog owner. And Fred's going to be on the ground floor and probably going to be there in the next 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I then said to her, here's your top tips. And she read the top tips. Introduce yourself. Don't talk to the guide dog. Offer sighted guide on the side opposite to the mobility aid. Walk at the pace of the person. Say when you're leaving the person. That kind of stuff. Walk at the pace of the person. That was the top tips. Mm-hmm. And off she went on her own. And she was shaking like a leaf because she'd gone into conscious incompetence to a certain extent. It was the first time she'd ever done it. And she was like, how am I going to do this? But you could see her repeating in her head, introduce yourself, do this, do this. And she went down, she met the gent at the door, introduced herself, didn't talk to his guide dog, offered sighted guide on the side opposite to the dog. She walked at the pace of the person. She took them up to the meeting room where they were going. She got them a cup of tea. She said she was leaving them when she came away. And she came back to us standing at reception and she was shaking like a leaf. Mm-hmm. With the biggest, broadest grin you've ever seen in your entire life. And I've got goosebumps running up and down my arm right now because I know that we made a massive difference to her and how she interacted with that person.
Awesome.
And that feeling, you know this more than anybody, customer service is such that there is a high turnover of staff. And you think about hospitality or tourism, there is a high turnover of staff and it's very hard to maintain the training. But there's a high turnover of staff because it's maybe not seen as a long-term role. And there's a good reason for that. It's because it's thankless. It's a really challenging thing to be in where you maybe...
But I also think there's a large part of the turnover is, it's due to all the things that you've highlighted. But there's also a lot of people that want to take pride in that. And if they're not enabled to do a good job, then they can get battered.
Yeah, exactly.
And a series of poor encounters or ill-supported sort of incidents can take its toll. And people are like, "Oh no, that's it. I've had enough of this."
Scope had a campaign a couple of years ago called End the Awkward, hashtag End the Awkward. And it was all about how 18 to 35-year-olds feel awkward when they meet a disabled person. Mm-hmm. To such an extent that if they meet a disabled person and have a bad experience, they then don't meet the next disabled person and they avoid it.
Sure.
So they don't approach the person and say, hello there, I'm Michael, I'm the customer service guy here on reception. How can I help you today? They don't do that. They go the other direction. Yeah. And that doesn't do anybody any favors. However, when somebody walks through the door and you go, going out, that's John. I'm going up to speak to John. Hi there, John. My name's Michael. I'm customer service representative. Don't worry, your dog looks amazing, but I'm not going to talk to it. But we'd like to take sighted guide, and I'm happy to, on whichever arms. And the person goes, wow, best customer service I've ever had. Now, on welcome, within 24 hours, the visitor gets a message to say, how good was your visit? Mm-hmm. And they can write a small piece of text in, and that goes directly to the customer service team, not TripAdvisor. It goes directly to the customer service team to say, I was met at the door by Michael. He was brilliant. The boss turns around to Michael and says, Michael, Well done, mate. You
Nice
did a
job.
good job.
And so, how does it work? And so you talk about somebody that is assisted by a guide dog, so they have a visual impairment, but this is an app that sits on their mobile phone. I mean, does that mean that there's a voice to text element to it, or how does that work? But to enable them to almost like self-serve in many ways.
So everybody's mobile phone has got the most amazing accessibility functions on it. And if everybody goes into settings and then looks, they will see accessibility on their phone. Now I'm going to turn on VoiceOver on my Apple phone. Okay, so I've just turned on VoiceOver. Here is VoiceOver.
VoiceOver on. News folder. Docs folder. Inclusion folder. Utilities folder. 10 language. Headings. Containers. Volume. Speaking rate. 80%. 75%.
So that's all already built into.
That's standard on every single phone.
Who knew?
Blind people know.
Well, no, indeed. I mean, kind of crumbs. There's my ignorance, right? But it's like you don't. That's wonderful. So there's the accessibility. It does what it says on the tin, right?
Yeah. So it means that as long as you, as a designer or developer of an app, understand VoiceOver and TalkBack on Samsung or Android phones, if you know that, you can design your app to be compatible with the accessibility features that are already on the phone, Zoom text, whatever it is, assistive touch. You can even connect your phone to your hearing aid. Modern hearing aids have Bluetooth connections. So if you can design knowing how accessible modern technology is, you can make everything easy for everybody.
Wow. On the terms of is it also there's also the app linked to GPS and location based services. So actually you can see via your kind of, I feel like the console, so for example, that a business has got this set up and somebody set up an appointment and they need to be greeted, that somebody's entered the building because they've gone, ping, is here.
We were using, initially GPS. However, we're moving away from that and we're actually going to start using, people might have heard of What 3 Words. They've been advertising a lot recently. They're amazing. I'm actually doing a presentation with them next week for Global Accessibility Awareness Day. But we'll be adding things like that in, so you'll know exactly where somebody is when they trigger an arrival. Initially, we were using beacons, but which could trigger when you got close to them. However, we're actually going to a manual arrival. So when the disabled person arrives at the building, they press a button on their phone and that sends a message to the customer service team to say, here I am. Right. I've arrived and this is where I am. And that, of course, in turn triggers the information to the customer service team to say, take 2 minutes of your time to read this. You're going to recognize the person, you're going to know how to interact, and you're also going to know what they're here to do today. And even beyond that, you're also going to have an idea as to how you could upsell to them.
Okay. I mean, that's also kind of at the same time, it's sort of respectful of privacy, data and security concerns and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to add or highlight that we've kind of like missed out? Because I just would want to push people to the Welcome app and just to kind of to take a look at it, because I think the idea that 20% of the general population have some sort of disability, and the majority of them will have a hidden disability. It means that it's an imperative for people to look at. So what else should we be be thinking about?
So I think the key bit of information here is that this is not an expensive solution. This is a staff training tool. In fact, it could be a staff trainer who's just walking through the door and says, tomorrow I'm coming in and I will have clicked the button to say that I want you to interact with me as if I was autistic. And you can then get staff to actually take that into consideration. You use it as a way of accreditation for your staff. But I think the really key thing here is anybody out there could install this for as little as £30 a month. That's what we charge. This is a £30 a month tool. It's truly a differentiator when you have it in, but guaranteed when a business doesn't have it in, the business that does is going to be differentiated. So I think and I don't really, to tell you the truth, there is so much business in the world here. It doesn't have to be Welcome that people use. They can go and find somebody else that's doing it. There isn't anybody else just yet. But we couldn't cover the entire world because every single train station to racetrack to betting office to pub to restaurant needs this advanced knowledge of somebody who's arriving. I would say check it out. But the key here is to know your customer, Interact with your customer with a little bit of extra knowledge and maybe with a little bit of hubris when you see somebody you think you are in control of or more important than, or that they are needy. Disabled people aren't needy. They just need you to remove barriers.
Sure. So, Gavin, there's somebody who's, in the midst of all of this, trying to improve service and experience, particularly for, people that have disabilities. What does the future of service and experience look like for you? Or what are some of the big kind of challenges that you think that we face ahead that we've got to navigate?
So I think probably the greatest challenge is in raising awareness. I think if you look at somebody like the Valuable 500, which was Caroline Casey's initiative, where she went to Davos and she was speaking the World Economic Forum, and she's managed to get 500 CEOs from the top companies in the world to say, we are going to think about inclusion, accessibility, and diversity within our organizations as a matter of course. Well, that's brilliant, but it's the person on the street. It's the person on the street who maybe is elderly and doesn't see disability as them, or sees somebody else and thinks of a disabled person as what they might have thought they were in the 1950s or 60s. The truth is, we need to change how our attitudes towards other people, start seeing other people as equal members of society. And I think that's the biggest challenge, because it's always been the biggest challenge. When you see somebody as different, we don't necessarily take into consideration what we can do to make their experience better. We need to stop seeing people as other and start thinking of us as a global community of individuals who just need to be helped to obtain services or access services or transport or whatever it might be. And once we can have that, then we'll certainly be getting close to it.
But if we had to boil it all down, I mean, and because I think a lot of people could get, we've just added a big thing on people's to-do list possibly, is like, to consider this, and this could affect 20% of a market's population. I mean, they might go, I'm slightly overwhelmed by this. But if I was actually to boil it down and say, well, actually, if they were going to get started, what would be your on this?
Well, quite obviously, I would say contact us, because Welcome is going to change how your staff. I'm going to say that, but let's just put that to one side. I think and I was going to say that, but the most important thing here is that we need to reflect who we are serving within our own companies. So if you're a company of 5,000 employees and you look at those employees and you go, I don't think I have any disabled people working for me. You might have. There might be somebody with autism or something like this who works for your company. They've just never felt comfortable saying it, or somebody who's dyslexic. They've never actually said it. But if we know within our organizations that our organizations reflect society, then not only will our attitudes reflect society, but our products will as well.
Sure.
When you are providing something and people who are involved in the development of that product understand the people who are going to use it, the products are going to be more purpose-built. So I would say employment of disabled people is the most important thing people can think about doing in the future.
Yeah, and so it's a straight injection.
Yeah, definitely. And also making sure that the people who are working for you already feel more comfortable about saying that they are disabled, knowing that that's not going to be held against them. Because let's face it, they're probably doing a good job already. Why would they now do a bad job? So it's just accepting that. Elon Musk the other day just turned around and said, "Hi guys, I've got Asperger's."
Yeah.
We can't say he's not successful.
No.
Would he have been successful if we'd known that from the start? Well, the jury's out.
Yeah. No, indeed. So that's great advice. Thank you for that, Gavin. So before we go though, at the end of these interviews, I always ask 2 questions related to, the latest book that I published called Punk CX. And I've been doing these ongoing word association sort of collection of words. Now, no pressure, but the first word, I've collected a list of about 123 words.
Oh, wow.
So, and then that's just more of a case of to try and plumb the collective creativity of all the people that I speak to, but also to show that a punk approach to customer experience is quite a broad church.
Yeah.
The first question is, what one or 2 words, if you like, would you use to describe a more punk approach to customer service and customer experience?
Well, immediately the biggest challenge here is picking a word that nobody's picked before out of 120. So I think that's the entrepreneur in me is going, right, well, there needs something else. But I did give this a little bit of thought previously because I knew it was a question that you asked people. And I had a couple of words in my head, but the one that actually I think that might need some explanation is obvious. And the reason for that is because when anybody has ever said to you about an idea they've had that is brilliant, you go, that's really obvious. Is that not being done already?
Yeah.
It just seems so obvious that we should be doing things differently. Punk CX ideal is don't just get stuck in a rut doing things the way that you should, and when you do come up with something new, people around you are going to say, I wish I'd thought of that. That seems very obvious. That's remarkable. I had that idea several years ago, but I didn't do anything with it.
Sure.
So I think Punk CX, it feels to me that it's obvious when things need to be done, but you do need innovators and forward thinkers to actually do it for it to then be seen as obvious.
I like that. I like that a lot. So the second question then is, so what company or brand do you think epitomizes that sort of ethos?
This is an interesting one. There's a company called BrewDog that I'm not a massive fan of real ale, but I think they had a fantastic attitude towards branding. Mm-hmm. And I can remember many years ago now, there was an organization called Camera, which was all about people were sitting around in pubs with large beards, drinking real ale, smoking pipes.
Yes.
But BrewDog turned this kind of ale drinking into something incredibly punk. And I think they had amazing marketing campaigns and advertising campaigns. And I think they are the epitome of that kind of let's do something different.
Gavin, thank you for that. Thank you for thank you for everything. Thank you for what you're doing with the Welcome app and leaning into the disability and trying to make the service and experience that they receive kind of better and helping kind of companies, to do that. I mean, I just think you should be one. Thank you for that and congratulate you on the efforts and wish you all the success. And hopefully you being on the podcast will, get you in the ears of more people. So yeah.
Adrian, I'll just say just one last thing I came from a charity background, but this company is not a charity.
No.
This company is, as far as I can see, social capitalism. I want to be Scotland's next unicorn company through the growth of the potential growth that we could get. And I want the company to be all over the world, providing better services for disabled people through making sure that businesses are making more money from the people that have got the money to spend. Mm-hmm. I want my company to skyrocket because of that. If I can do that, my investors are going to go, oh my God, we need to find other companies out there that have social good, high growth, social capitalism as something I want to invest my money into. If I can prove that, then I'm going to potentially change how we look at these things. I'd love that. That would be so cool.
Well, Thank you. That's some mission, Gavin, and I applaud you for that. And so I wish you all the very, very best. And I'll do whatever I can to help you on that journey. But yes, congratulations. Thank you for what you do and also just for sharing your time and your experience with us today. That's been awesome.
Thank you very much indeed.
Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing kind of people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. One final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.